All right, welcome into Starting Five here on the Five Reasons YouTube channel. You also can hear this on the Five on the Floor podcast feed. We are produced here on the YouTube channel, as always, by our friend Manny Chang. We thank him for doing that. We also want to credit our sponsors, starting with All Pro Construction Builders, our guy Danny and his team. Quality is their specialty. You need those storm windows, those storm doors. And if you mention Five Reasons, you get a 10% discount off your entire order. They're based in Miami, allproconstructionbuilders.com, but they can service the entire area all the way down in Monroe as well, or up in Broward County. Again, check them out at allproconstructionbuilders.com, All Pro Construction Builders on Instagram. The phone number, you can reach Danny directly, 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. They can also handle the additions and the renovations. They do carpentry and more, and they're a state certified general contractor. Also want to mention Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. Thursday night game coming up, Jaguars and Saints. Actually a pretty decent Thursday night game for a change. You can play it on Prize Picks. You also can get in there for the NBA props. They're all up there right now for the season. And even for the opening night, in fact, they've got a Steph Curry prop of half a point. I would assume he's going to hit that. So go to prizepicks.com, the Google Play Store, or the Apple App Store, and use the code 5. It is legal in the state of Florida. All right, Miami Heat last night played their final home preseason game, and they have one more on the road in Houston, which feels like the kind of game they're not going to bring a whole lot of their players to, similar to what happened in San Antonio. But we didn't see a lot of them last night. Again, no Jimmy Butler, no Kyle Lowry, no Kevin Love, just being held out to allow others the chance to play. That's how they put it on the injury report. And then others, Caleb Martin, who I did ask Eric Spoelstra about prior to the game, and it seemed like he's making some progress. I would expect him to be ready for the opener. No Jaime Jaquez, he's declared that he will be ready for the opener. We'll see if he actually plays in the opener. And then Josh Richardson, who did play, actually injured his ankle during the game. I don't know how severe it is at this point. But we'll see what happens with him. And I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but Kyle Lowry also did not play. He was not mentioned initially as somebody who wasn't going to play, but he did not. Nikola Jovic did play up and down. We'll get into him a little bit as we go forward. But let's get into the guys who are making an impact consistently now. And there are two players now that I think have really factored in. And again, I think accomplished what they have wanted to in this preseason. The first is Haywood Highsmith, who looks like a rotation player. And I don't know exactly where that's going to be. I wouldn't be stunned if at some point it's as a starter at the 4 next to Bam, if they decide to keep Caleb Martin off the bench, which is what I think they should do. And if they make the decision to start Kyle Lowry at point guard, which seems the way that it's trending. I have a hard time seeing how you're going to survive those opening minutes with Love, Lowry, and Hero in the starting lineup. So I think at some point, if it doesn't happen at the very beginning, they may need to put someone at the 4 who can actually guard the ball on the perimeter so that Kyle Lowry doesn't have to do that and Tyler Hero doesn't have to do that as much. And because otherwise you're in a situation where unless, again, you're covering it up with zone or something else, they're going to get torched at the point of attack. So Haywood Highsmith, to me, has been the player who has popped the most in this preseason. We can talk about others who've had moments, but I think Haywood went from someone who, again, last year it's kind of like, okay, what exactly is his role here? He doesn't have much of a ceiling. The floor is okay, but again, we don't know how good he's going to be, how much he's going to play. To someone who fans were calling for more minutes for in the playoffs. In fact, he told us on the podcast that he would hear that when he would be out. Like, why wasn't he playing in the finals and all that? And now he comes into camp, and it's not just like incremental improvement here. He's made a dramatic improvement in the one area he had to improve in the most, which is his shooting. And it's not just that he's more proficient from the corners, which is where he would likely be the most, but he's shooting that wing 3, that elbow 3 pretty well right now. And not only is he shooting it well, but he's pulling right up into it as if he has no fear of it. And if that's the case, Eric Spoelstra is going to play him. So he went from a guy who we talked about as potentially competing for the 10th spot in their rotation with Jaquez and Jovic to someone who's going to find his way into the front 9 most nights. And again, where that exactly is going to be, I'm not sure. But to me, Haywood Highsmith has been the guy who's had the most impressive preseason from where he was to where he is. Now, I know people are going to mention Tyler Hero. There's unquestionably been improvements in his game, his efficiency, not just in the shooting overall, but how he's getting to his spots, the economy of dribbling, much better than it was before. I think he'll fit much better into an offense than he has previously. And so I would say Tyler's up there as well. But Haywood, in terms of us thinking he had kind of maxed out to a certain degree and not having maxed out, I would say he's been, to me, the unexpected kind of star story of the preseason. The other guy on a slightly smaller scale, but someone who I think has earned a spot, which he needed to do, was Jamal Cain. 14 rebounds last night. We hadn't heard a lot. I was talking to somebody last night who's got pretty good insight into the Heat organization. He's been in the Heat organization a long time. He's not a decision maker, but he knows what's going on. And he basically said to me, I didn't hear much about him in camp. We hadn't heard much about him in camp. Like he hadn't sort of stood out. The last 3 preseason games, he stood out. He's had the opportunities and he's played well. And Spoelstra mentioned him first last night. I don't think there's any question that he should get one of the 2 open roster spots. The other roster spot I don't think is going to be filled at this time anyway. But Jamal Cain to me is the type of guy that not only can he help you now, but he could take another mini leap, kind of like Highsmith has this past summer. And he's protection in a lot of ways for their wings, because if you look at their future, Caleb Martin, again, if he performs the way that we expect him to perform this year, he's going to get paid a lot of money, and it may not be here. And then Josh Richardson, he's on a 1-year deal. And so, he's not necessarily going to renew at that deal if he plays well. And I don't know that the Heat are going to go deeper into the tax, not just for Caleb, but for Richardson. So Highsmith and Kane become next in terms of their wing depth and maybe take another jump next year, because I would expect that Haywood will probably get one of those 3-year contracts that they like to give out. So Highsmith and Kane to me have been the 2 guys who have really jumped out from that group. Jaquez again had the 1 game. We haven't been able to see it a whole lot else. And Jovic, the problem I think there is there are certain combinations and lineups that he's going to work better with, and we haven't gotten to see the full complement of players. And I can say that someone else I spoke to, again, not a decision maker in the Heat organization, but someone who's been around a long time, is a different person, said, that in a lot of ways he felt it was sort of a wasted camp for Nico because of the injury and because we just haven't had a chance to see him. And he thinks, maybe he's another year away from really making a significant contribution. And in this case, because of his age, that's okay. But they needed somebody to jump up to fill out this depth. And it does look like Highsmith and Kane are guys that they're going to trust on a regular basis. Second thing I wanted to get to today was the idea of them not having their rotation during preseason. Now that, again, I think the preseason is for all purposes over for their primary guys, and whether or not it matters. And I'm not sure that it does. I've covered enough of these at this point, unfortunately, with my age, to kind of recognize that when it comes to the preseason, we make too much of not just rotation combinations, but also kind of where guys are if they're proven players. And Jimmy is the one thing that comes up here because unlike Bam, he hasn't played in any of the preseason games. He's not going to play, I wouldn't think, in the last preseason game. So that means essentially no preseason for Jimmy Butler, with the exception again of what he's done with his work against his own teammates. Does it matter? No. I mean, look, they're going to put the only way it mattered was Eric Spoelstra is going to put players out there who complement Jimmy and Bam the best, and maybe complement Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler the best. And so you would have liked to have seen how that looked in the preseason, but most of these guys, we've seen it already. I would have liked to have seen Jaquez with Jimmy to see if, okay, they could coexist on the court because there is so much similarity in their game. That would have been nice, but it didn't happen. Okay. But I'm sure Spoelstra took a look at it behind the scenes. And as far as Jimmy goes, whether or not he'll be able to ramp up, remember his first year with Miami, he missed the first 3 games because of a personal issue. It didn't seem to stop him. I think he'll be fine. He knows how to play with this team. Getting to Bam, I thought he's had a good camp. I think that you can see some growth in his offensive game that will translate a little bit. I think we are past the point of expecting huge jumps from Bam. To me, it's refining things that he already does well more than necessarily adding things like a 3-point shot. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's being more efficient in the post. It's not dropping the ball down to his knees so it gets stripped all the time. It's being more assertive when he has somebody on him who can't guard him out on the perimeter and attacking. It's shooting the mid range as soon as he's got it. And of course, making it at a slightly higher clip. That's where I think we're at with Bam. I don't think, this, leap to like a Carmelo type level offensively is happening. I don't see it. But if he continues to do what he's doing defensively, he does the things he does well better, more consistently, doesn't take a back seat when he shouldn't, I think they'll be fine. And then, as I mentioned, Tyler's been more efficient. As far as the others, Josh Richardson hasn't really stood out in any way. And again, now he's dealing with the injury, but we kind of know what Josh is. I don't think there's a big concern there. Josh is a plug and play guy. He knows the system. And same for Caleb. I mean, Caleb's still working behind the scenes. Like he went through a full workout. He went through their hardest workout, just prior to the preseason game. He'll be fine. He's dealing with the knee. They don't want to mess with it right now. And he has a significant role. The thing about Caleb is he learns how to do everything. So as he told me, he wants to be a Swiss Army knife. They can put him anywhere on the floor. The confidence will still be there from what happened last season. So I don't think there's been anything dramatically bad that's happened during this camp. You don't have the kind of injury that looks like it's going to linger deep into the season, certainly not with any of their core players. And look, let's be honest, even for those of us who don't think he should be starting, Kyle Lowry's looked better in this camp, I thought, than he's looked a lot of the time during his Heat tenure. I mean, he's in better shape. He's distributing the ball. He needs to shoot more, particularly if he's in the starting lineup. Like if Tyler's going to attack, okay, and Kyle's going to be spotting up, when Kyle gets the ball, he needs to shoot it. He's a good shooter. He should not be passing on those kind of shots. But my overall take for the preseason is this. When you don't have a major injury, which they have not had to this point, and it doesn't look like they're going to have it because, again, they're not going to play their core guys during the last preseason game. When you don't have a key injury, to me, it's automatically a B. It can't be worse than that. Okay. You don't lose somebody to an ACL or an Achilles or a hamstring thing that we're going to be asking the Heat about for 6 weeks. It's already a B. Then, if you get a couple of your young players to pop to show you that you can count on them, you elevate it to a B plus. So I would give that for Highsmith and Kane. And that's where I keep it, honestly, and Hawkins for what we saw in the limited time. And the fact that, maybe Swider's a guy who can contribute also as a two-way if they keep him in that sense. I can't make it higher than B plus because I don't think they got to work through some of their rotations the way that they would have liked to in the games. Eric said this is all part of the process. You let other guys play. There's only 5 games, and you've got a lot of guys that you got to look at, and you want to play the guys more who you haven't seen as much in these situations as the ones that you have, right? Eric doesn't need to know what Jimmy can do. It's just a question of having the guys around Jimmy to see what they can do with him, and they didn't get the opportunity to do that. So as we close here, again, without the preseason closing just yet, and we'll get to more of it in the cuts. And we saw a couple of guys, Lonzus Williams yesterday, who was let go. Justin Champagne, by the way, is a player who looks like they may keep around. And I do want to mention this. This comes in from the commenter, Aaron, on the YouTube channel. Is Ethan impressed by Thomas Bryant? I should have mentioned him too. That's the third guy other than Highsmith and Kane, who I think has exceeded expectations. Orlando Robinson has been bad when he's played also. But Thomas Bryant has shown why they got him, and I think has shown, and I don't want to get too carried away because every time he gets playing time, then he loses it. Okay, we've seen that before. But you've seen what he offers them that their other backup bigs have not. And as Eric Spoelstra said flat out, it's something we needed, what he provides. So he's going to get a long look and a lot of opportunity, and it's going to give Eric a lot of comfort going into a game knowing that if Bam is in foul trouble, which doesn't happen often, or again, they just want to get Bam a little bit more rest, that Bryant can give them offense. There's no question he can give them offense. And if they're going to go with the lineups the way it looks like now, with Lowry starting and Love starting, if that's what ends up happening, you got questions on the defensive end in the starting lineup for sure. But off the bench, you can protect Thomas Bryant defensively because you're going to be rolling out Caleb Martin, Haywood Highsmith, and Josh Richardson with that group, probably along with Duncan Robinson. So you'll be okay defensively, even with Bryant out there. And again, with Bryant, it's not that he can't do certain things. He gets lost sometimes. That was kind of the talk about him. But again, if players are not getting to the paint, it's not as big an issue, and they'll have two or three of their better wing and perimeter defenders out there with him most of the time. So I should have mentioned him as well. So I'm going to say, as we close here, my grade for the preseason so far, a solid B plus. And I think after everything that happened this offseason, they'll take it. Want to thank our producer Manny Chang. Also want to thank our sponsors, Prize Picks, All Pro Construction Builders. If you're listening on the Five on the Floor podcast feed, I'm going to give you an interview here that I did with Ted Ballard. He runs the broadcasting for the Miami Heat about the new Jack Ramsey display that's going to be out there on November 1st. So if you're an old head Heat fan, stick around for that. Have a good day, everybody, on the YouTube channel.